The laughter echoed first, sharp and careless, cutting through the polished silence of the mansion like broken glass. It was the kind of laughter that came from power, from comfort, from a life where mistakes were paid for and consequences rarely arrived. The words that followed were just as dismissive, spoken with the ease of someone who had never been told no. Translate this and my salary is yours. The millionaire leaned back, amused, certain he had just offered an impossible joke. What he did not expect was the stillness that followed. What he did not expect was the maid, standing quietly near the doorway, feeling something awaken inside her that had been buried for years. Before the story pulls you any deeper, take a moment to support stories that remind us of kindness and second chances. If you believe that goodness can come from the most unexpected places, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your small action helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. The mansion had stood on that hill for decades, white walls gleaming against trimmed gardens and iron gates that never seemed to rust. Inside, every surface reflected wealth, from marble floors to chandeliers that caught the sunlight and scattered it like diamonds. The man who owned it all had built his fortune on intelligence, bold risks, and an unshakable belief that money proved worth. He trusted numbers more than people, contracts more than promises, and power more than humility. To him, the world was a ladder, and he had climbed high enough to look down without guilt. Those who cleaned his floors, washed his dishes, and pressed his clothes were background figures, necessary but invisible. Among them was the maid, a woman whose presence blended into the routine of the house. She moved quietly, efficiently, always respectful, always careful not to draw attention. Her uniform was simple, her hands rough from years of work, her posture slightly bent from long hours. To the millionaire, she was just another employee, someone whose name he barely remembered. To herself, she was someone who had learned to survive by staying silent. But beneath that silence lived a past filled with books, late-night studying, and dreams interrupted by tragedy. Years ago, before life hardened her, she had been a student with a mind hungry for languages, symbols, and meaning. When her family fell apart and responsibility came crashing down, she traded classrooms for kitchens, ambition for survival. That afternoon, the millionaire had been in a mood of restless boredom. A business partner had sent him a photograph of an old document discovered during an overseas acquisition, filled with strange symbols and unfamiliar script. The message attached was lighthearted, almost teasing, suggesting that understanding the document might reveal something valuable. The millionaire scoffed at the idea, convinced it was nothing more than an antique curiosity. Still, curiosity tugged at him. He printed the image and placed it on the table, calling in several staff members, asking if anyone recognized the language. They shook their heads, some embarrassed, some amused. He laughed, confident in his superiority, and made his careless promise out loud, offering a month's salary to anyone who could translate it, knowing full well he expected silence. The maid had been standing at the edge of the room, holding a tray, her eyes drifting toward the paper without conscious intent. The symbols stirred something deep in her memory, like a forgotten melody. Her heart skipped, not with certainty, but with recognition. She had seen something like this before, years ago, in a university library, during a course she had loved more than anything else. She felt a familiar ache in her chest, a mix of longing and fear. She told herself to look away, to remain invisible, to remember her place. But the words on the page seemed to call her forward, challenging the quiet life she had accepted. Her greatest challenge was not the document, but the weight of doubt pressing down on her. She had spent years convincing herself that her education no longer mattered, that dreams were luxuries for people with safety nets. Standing there, she fought an internal battle between fear of humiliation and the unbearable regret of staying silent once again. Slowly, almost unconsciously, she stepped forward. The room stilled. The millionaire's laughter faded, replaced by surprise. She felt every eye on her, felt the old shame creep in, the fear that she would be dismissed, mocked, or worse, punished for overstepping. Without asking permission, she reached for the paper, her hands trembling just enough to betray her nerves. She studied it carefully, not rushing, allowing her mind to slip back into a version of herself she thought was lost. The symbols began to make sense, patterns forming, meaning emerging line by line. Time seemed to slow as she worked through it in her head. The millionaire watched with growing irritation, then curiosity, then something closer to unease. He expected her to stumble, to apologize, to retreat. Instead, she remained focused, her expression calm but intense, as if the world around her had faded. When she finished, she explained the translation clearly, carefully, revealing that the document was not meaningless at all. It was a legal record tied to land ownership, an old agreement that could determine the rights to a property worth millions. It contained warnings, conditions, and a clause that invalidated a modern claim the millionaire had recently purchased. As her explanation unfolded, the color drained from his face. The laughter that had once filled the room felt distant and foolish now. He realized that what he had dismissed as a joke could unravel a deal he was proud of, exposing him to loss and embarrassment. For the maid, the moment was both terrifying and liberating. She had spoken not as a servant, but as a thinker, a scholar, someone with knowledge that mattered. Yet even as the truth landed heavily in the room, she braced herself for backlash. Years of experience had taught her that stepping out of line often came with consequences. The millionaire, however, remained silent, staring at the paper as if it had betrayed him. For the first time in a long while, he felt something unfamiliar, humility. The realization that intelligence did not belong exclusively to the powerful shook him deeply. The days that followed were tense. Lawyers confirmed the translation, validating every detail. The deal was paused, and the millionaire faced the uncomfortable task of acknowledging the maid's role. She returned to her duties, unsure whether she would be rewarded or quietly dismissed. Her nights were restless, filled with memories of what she once dreamed of becoming. She wondered if this moment would change anything or simply fade like so many others. Change arrived quietly. One morning, she was asked to sit down, not as an employee being reprimanded, but as a person being seen. The millionaire, no longer laughing, no longer mocking, offered her the promised salary without hesitation. More than that, he offered her something unexpected: respect. He admitted that he had underestimated her, that his arrogance had blinded him. The confession was awkward, imperfect, but sincere enough to crack something open in both of them. For her, it was validation. For him, it was a reckoning. As weeks passed, the dynamic within the mansion shifted. The maid was no longer invisible. She was asked questions, consulted, listened to. The millionaire, once obsessed with control, began to understand the value of listening. He learned pieces of her story, of the education she had sacrificed, of the circumstances that forced her into silence. Each detail chipped away at his assumptions. He started funding language courses for his staff, encouraging growth rather than obedience. The mansion, once a symbol of distance, slowly transformed into a place where people felt seen. The greatest change, however, happened within the maid herself. The moment she dared to step forward rewrote how she saw her own worth. She began to study again at night, reclaiming pieces of her identity she thought were gone forever. Her confidence grew not from praise, but from self-respect. She no longer moved through the world apologetically. She understood now that her value had never disappeared, it had only been waiting for courage. Near the end of this story, if this journey has touched your heart, please take a second to engage with this video. Like it, share it, and let the algorithm carry stories of quiet strength to others who might need them. As the millionaire looked out from his mansion one evening, watching the sun dip behind the hills, he reflected on how close he had come to missing something priceless. Not the money, not the deal, but the reminder that humanity is not measured by status. The maid, now walking with her head held higher, passed by, and this time he noticed her not as staff, but as someone whose life had intersected with his in a way that changed them both. Before the final moment, here's a special request for you. Please comment below and share what this story made you feel, or tell us about a moment when someone underestimated you. The laughter that once echoed through the mansion never sounded the same again. It was softer now, thoughtful, touched with humility. And in that quiet transformation, two lives moved forward, forever altered by a single moment when courage met opportunity, and silence finally gave way to truth.